Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Dream with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and so provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found on lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our fourth episode of season 21, a very special guest and hypnosis expert, Sheila Wenger. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Sheila, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello there. It's a pleasure to be here. I came to hypnosis on the path to becoming a marriage and family therapist. And before that, in my prior life, I was a French teacher of 17 years and a mother of twins. But I had always wanted to be a therapist, and I was feeling like my students needed that more than they needed me to teach what I was teaching. So I took the leap. And in my journey towards marriage and family therapy, I had to study hypnosis, and it just blew my mind. And so I immediately applied to become a student of hypnosis. And when I got that certification, I felt that I was immediately able and ready to change people's lives quickly. So I opened a practice before finishing my marriage and family therapy license. And in 1 year, I was able to totally replace my teaching salary plus and without advertising. And the reason was I was changing people's lives quickly and permanently. And so they just would tell everybody about it, and they were flooding me with clients, and it's continued to prove to me that it is what I thought it could be, and that is therapy that is fast, effective, and long lasting to a degree that I can hardly believe when I see it happen in my office.
Wow, wow, well, thank you so much, Sheila, for being here today. It seems like we both have something in common. We both speak French fluently, so that's one good thing. So,
Yes.
yes, but are you French originally, or?
I am not. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty rusty after having not taught for a while. So I wouldn't call myself fluent anymore, but I just learned it in school and I taught the beginning levels. So, you
Okay.
know.
So, I'm trying to explain to all of our listeners the difference between someone who is a marriage licensed therapist that will deal with all the communication problems that people may have, either using the EFT method, which is emotional focused therapy, and whatever else that could work for them. The hypnosis, do you actually put someone in a hypnotic level where they can actually you basically change the way they think about the communication patterns with their significant other, or they will tell you our problem is this. And then you will basically speak to them by after putting them into a trance, speak to them about their issue. What exactly is
Great,
it?
great question. And every hypnotherapist does this a little bit differently, but I think the reason that I've had such success is because my whole life has trained me on emotional intelligence and studying relationships and the levels of consciousness that we have within us. So the way that I work is I talk with my clients for half of the session. My sessions are an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And in that first half, we are examining what's the trouble, and I'm specifically looking for a belief that they are believing in their subconscious, because they, on the conscious level, much like you experience in therapy, on the conscious level they can often see the pattern that's going on, completely understand it, and even know what they must do to get out of it,
Mhm.
but they can't get out of it. So once we know, the way that I operate is that when I can find the belief is something that got laid down from their childhood, from experiences, from what life showed them before their brain was developed. The situation, the environment they were raised in, when their brain is undeveloped, is a microcosm. They believe that that's how the world is and how they must act in it. So if they're not getting optimal nurturing, they have to constantly be working to prevent chaos from happening in that environment. They grow up thinking that that's how the world is and that that's what they must do.
Okay.
And that program can be running, and they might grow up to be a rational, very intelligent adult who intellectually completely understands how they got to have this pattern and know what to do to stop it, and not be able to stop it, because deep down There's a fear from childhood, from a long time ago, that they're not worth getting that nurturing, getting that loving. So once we know what belief is playing a role, once I know that, then I know what kind of hypnosis I can use to make it easier for them to make the change.
Mhm.
So, and I have 5 different techniques I use. I was trained in the 5 path method created by Cal Banyan, who's still, I think he's 40 years into using hypnosis. His methodology is extremely effective. But what the hypnosis can do through age regression is the body has a somatic signature that is directly tied to how they felt, how they had to feel when they were a child or a teenager or whatever traumatic experience they had. They're still feeling that way when they're triggered. So when they're in my chair and they're in a trance, they're aware of everything I'm saying, but they're just relaxed. They're not editing and revising and having their own thoughts on top of what I'm doing. I can have them bring up that feeling that they're tired of feeling. And all they have to do is think about the way they feel all the time. And then I'll say, okay, where do you feel that? And they can identify it's here in the body. Then I will use hypnosis to regress to other times they felt that way, and then get to the earliest one we can find. That's where the pattern began, and that is where the wound lives in their body. It's as if that 2-year-old them, sometimes infant them, sometimes 12-year-old them, is still not healed from this experience because they had no way to process it. So once they're in that state of reliving it,
Mhm.
I can help completely heal it in the body by what happens is there's the adult in my chair and there's the little one reliving it. And they start to have a dialogue. I'll ask grown up, do you see that little you? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, is there anything wrong with that child? And they'll say no, and they'll start to tear up because they can see that that is a precious, innocent, beautiful little being who just in the circumstances didn't have what he needed.
Mhm.
But there was never anything about him that made him not worthy of getting it. So this client just becomes convinced, and then um, we do a healing process there where the grown up client can convince that child that even though it went through this, it grew up, it had these wonderful things in life, it got itself a career, it got itself a loving family, but now um, grown up is going to make sure it never has to feel that way again. And the client feels extremely protective of the little them inside that previously they've kind of been avoiding, honestly, because they're scared to face that they maybe weren't worthy of love, but now they're seeing that they're worthy of love and it was never their fault. And they have this absolutely healing transformational experience, and they come through that physically, emotionally, feeling different. It's not so much now about knowing anymore, it's about feeling different, and they don't have to feel that way anymore, so they don't feel whatever symptoms they were feeling from it, like clinginess
Mhm.
or attachment issues or you know um, anxious attachment, all those things. So it's been really remarkable just to watch this happen. And so I have people that say, I have one gal who's a psychiatrist herself, and she came and she said, I spent so many years and I totally understood the issue, but I just didn't go away until we finally got to that method. So that's at least a
Yes,
hopefully
but you
quality.
but this
uh,
approach will work great with people who deal or suffer from dissociative disorders. Because when you look at this approach of you calling back into the past from memories that were kept from the subconscious mind, and now you're resurfacing them, it's kind of you calling different identities to tell them when they felt that trauma.
yes, absolutely. And I had one client who her mother had her to keep the boyfriend. She got pregnant to trap the boyfriend. And then when she had my client, the boyfriend loved the baby and she was jealous of that. So then she started being angry at her own child, my client. And she said that for her whole life, she had abandonment issues and she could never make a relationship work. And we did that session. And right at the end of it, she looked at me and she said, I feel like my soul has been locked away in a box my whole life and I just got it out. So you're talking about disassociating with the self that wasn't loved and lovable and was traumatized. She just got in touch with her again in that experience. So absolutely, it has the power to do that.
But those feeling of abandonment, do they resurface if they do not constantly do hypnosis?
Great question. It depends on the level of severity. This methodology, the age regression technique, dramatically relieves that feeling, but without some kind of ongoing awareness that they're still susceptible to it. As all of us, we have to always sort of take our awareness of what we're susceptible to keep strengthening, and continued sessions do help with that, but it doesn't usually require someone on for year after year to keep coming back. Or if they do, it's like every few months they might want just a little boost, but it's not needed on an ongoing basis. What can happen though after the age regression session, where they do feel a great deal of relief, often they then get in touch with their anger, and that can come next. They can feel more self-worth and more self-esteem, but now they're sort of feeling about, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to have that? Other people didn't have that. What's that about? And they can feel a deep-seated anger. And so then Cal Banyan's method, the 5-path method, then moves into, it's called a forgiveness session, but it's such a loaded word, I hesitate to say it, but it is really what it is, because the anger is in their bodies too, for what happened. And then that session helps to release that out of the body, and it allows them to make sense of how it got to be this way at the subconscious level, not just on the conscious level. So you have them imagining putting a person that hurt them in the chair across from them, and they get a chance to say everything they needed to say. And then what's really fascinating about the method is then I talk to the person and I say, you see how this hurt you? How could you have done it? And this person who knows them can speak for them, and they start to make sense of it. Well, oh, I had a horrific childhood myself. I was bound and determined to do better than that, but I didn't have the tools. And when my client can see and make sense of that, it helps them choose to forgive them. And it's always their choice. You can never force it on them, but we define forgiveness as not forgetting, not condoning, but removing all the pain from here that was put there by them, so that I don't have to keep carrying it because I didn't put it there. So
So,
that's also very powerful.
so is it easier to forgive themselves than to forgive the culprit?
Great question. I haven't had as many clients that have to do self-forgiveness than I have forgiveness of others, but I have had a couple. And no, I don't have as much data on that, but I would say it was about the same level of difficulty.
Okay,
Yeah.
but what about fixing that level, which is if you have to give them this hypnosis treatment, how long will it take them to be able to forgive themselves versus forgive the culprit?
Okay, so there's another session for that. It's called forgiveness of self. So if that's left over, then you go after that. And I had a client I can speak to specifically on this. His wife passed away, and he was her caregiver for 10 years. But he knows that he was frustrated and irritable while he was caring for her. And now that she's not here, he has a lot of guilt about, did I really care for her the best way I could have? And in his forgiveness of self session, he saw that he was frustrated because she didn't want to do the work. She was diabetic. She didn't want to change her diet. She just wanted it to happen naturally, but it wasn't happening naturally. So he could have compassion for the frustration of it, and how that even though he was frustrated, he still showed up every day. He still did the work. It's just a hard situation. Everyone would feel that. So he was able to let that go.
So so like when you come into hypnosis, you discuss with a couple, but have you gone with also individual people that are not married and that are having difficulties in keeping a relationship?
Yes, I have. And I've had a lot of success with that. But also relieving the past of a hurt relationship too, like all of that. And when it comes to being able to make a relationship work, the foundation, which I know you know, is their relationship with themselves.
Correct.
So of course, where we have to put our energy and work, and they don't want to do that as much. They want to just, it's easier to just latch onto a distraction and excitement of a new relationship, but they, through, what we talk about and how I can prove it to them that this is the only way that it will work, and once they know that, it's still hard to do, right? It would still be just more exciting to go on a date and distract themselves from that. But that's where the hypnosis makes it easier, because in that kind of situation, I can get to the subconscious and give it a picture that if you don't address this relationship, here's where that path goes. And I can show them how other relationships just won't work, because you'll be trying to fill your own hole with that other person, and it keeps happening over and over. And I actually do paint a picture for them how it gets worse. The more it happens, then you feel like, oh, I can't make this work. And then you're harder on yourself and you have more to forgive, and it just makes more and more of a mess. And then I show them with a little effort, your path can go this way.
Okay.
And I show them what's possible that directly relates to what they want, what they are dreaming about, what they're hoping for. And on a subconscious level, that affects them, because when they want to go to the old pattern, something inside of them signals them, no, that'll take you down that terrible path. We can't do that. And even in the hypnosis, I'll tell them, when a tempting situation comes up, physically turn your body this other direction where this path goes, to remind yourself, give yourself a signal. If I go that way, it takes me down that terrible road I don't want to go. And it's very effective. I've used that to help people be able to find lasting relationships, but also to change their habits, to strengthen parent-child relationships, because it all springs really from that. Another principle that is related to this is that people are so quick to judge themselves. They think there's something wrong with them.
Mhm.
And especially if, like, for example, they know they should eat better and would feel better if they did, but they just can't. And there's nothing wrong with them. The principle that I work on is they are perfect. They've always been perfect. It's just something in life show them that they weren't, and they've been running that belief ever since. But when it comes to habits like this, it's often because there's a joy deficit. Someone who's going to sugar, it's because something inside of them is telling you, I'm not going to let you live without joy. So if you're not going to have any joy, I'm taking you to that sugar, and you might as well just enjoy it.
Correct.
So actually love springing up from them. There's not something wrong with them. And when they start to see that even their feelings, and this is another Cal Banyonism, he wrote The Secret Language of Feeling, that our feelings are there for a very good reason. They're trying to tell us where we need to adjust, what we need to get. If we're lonely, we need to create connection.
Right.
If we're frustrated, what we've been doing isn't working. We have to try something new. So when they learn that what's coming up from them is coming from love, it helps them accept that there isn't anything wrong with them.
Well, but that's, again, it's easier said than done. Uh,
Yes, it
the,
is.
the thing is that if it's so ingrained in their subconscious mind, all through their childhood, they've been mistreated, they've been told that they're worthless, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
It's hard for them to be able to change the belief and those limiting beliefs that they have for themselves. I'm not sure exactly how talking to their subconscious mind will make much of a difference, because it's so ingrained. It's like glued. How do you remove that glue?
Well, the biggest method for that is the age regression, because it directly gets to where it got laid down, the very experience. And the other thing that I didn't mention, that is the heart of it, is they become protective. My client becomes protective of the hurt child, and they take ownership for, I can't let that happen to you anymore. So somebody who's drawn to toxic relationships now has the conscious and subconscious awareness to say, I have a susceptibility for the little hurt me to go to someone who's going to hurt them. They're to be attracted to someone who's going to hurt them. So it is now my responsibility to take all of the parts of myself with him, so that I will reassure that hurt self that if it's going to be love, it will develop slowly and stay interesting. So you don't need to rush at it, cling to it, because it won't go away. And I'll be there with you, and make sure you know that if I go on a date I'm going with you. You will not do that alone. They become protective of the hurt self. They have the whole more awareness than they ever had before, the whole picture, where the hurt's coming from that leads them to more hurt inadvertently because it's desperate for something, and how they know that they will not let that happen. That child has felt that long enough, and they get this conviction, this determination that I must not let that happen. And they can't always do it fully by themselves, but they'll now come to the point of I will protect you from that, and I will let you express your feelings to me, and I will listen to you with compassion, and I'll give you space. And if I ever don't know what to do, I'll reach out to my support, my therapist, my hypnotherapist, right? If I ever need that, I will make sure you get it. So that protective force comes alive in them. And then they sort of didn't know they had that, which makes them start to fall in love with themselves a bit more because they didn't know they could be that way. And now they're being that way.
I see. So do you think that meditation is a form of self-hypnosis?
Yes, I'm glad you bring up meditation. Meditation's huge, and there are other methods that work too. But the reason that it's so powerful is it moves us into awareness
Okay.
of all the things operating inside of us rather than just being them, flying around, being pinballed by this pinball machine. We now step back and we can see what's happening while it's happening. We might still feel sad. We might still feel shame. We might still feel clingy. But now there's us going, oh, there's that clinginess. There it is. What do I need?
Mhm.
So it gives the separation that they need in order to be able to assess their own situation and give themselves what's needed to get through it. It's vitally helpful.
So
Anything that moves us into awareness like that.
if you could explain, listeners, what is, because I'm sure that a lot of them are just so curious to see what a hypnotherapist can do. How do you bring someone into that trance? How do you bring someone into closing their eyes and fully trusting you that you're not going to be able to mislead their subconscious mind into believe something completely different?
Yes, it's such a great question. Well, as I told you, we talk for 45 minutes before. So I've built a relationship there with to a very, solid degree. They can feel my intent. And I'll ask them before we go into the hypnosis, I'll say, are you nervous at all? And sometimes they'll say yes. And I'll say, is there anything you're nervous about? And they'll say, well, a lot of times they say, I'm afraid I won't be able to be hypnotized. They rarely, after being with me for 45 minutes, don't trust me. They can tell that I am here to help. My whole life's work is this, right? So they can usually tell. But sometimes because of their own past mistrust issues or harm or whatever, if they're still reluctant, I'll do this. I'll say, well, your heart knows.
Mhm.
So go in and check in with yourself and ask yourself, do you trust that I have nothing but the most pure intent to help your life? Ask yourself that and then they will do that. And then I'll get someone who is nervous and they'll go, yeah, no, I do. I trust you. So I won't put them in the chair until they feel comfortable because it won't do any good.
Right.
Now, they don't have to be super like, oh, yes, I can't wait. But they do have to find that they trust me. And then still, a lot of them don't think they'll be able to be hypnotized. And this is just fun for me because I've never not been able to hypnotize somebody. um, and what I do, and I do not follow a script either. There's some things I always do, but I usually make those up.
Okay.
But I'll just have them notice different things so that, like, they'll notice, for example, the chair beneath them and how it has the absolute ability to hold their body for them. They don't have to do anything. So just release any muscle tension and accept the support of that chair and feel what it feels like to feel absolutely unconditional support under your body and get better at receiving that. So many of my clients have been trained to give, work so hard for life to work that just letting them receive and telling them that that's a new skill that they want to get better at. So then they do, like, oh, I've never really done that before, just sunk into a chair and accepted the great feeling without having some tension. And then I'll put their attention on something else. Near my window, their cars go by, and I'll say, those sound a lot like ocean waves. And I'll have them think about the ocean and watch how it comes in and it always goes out, and how predictable and how reliable that is. And I kind of just give them something like appreciating that it'll always come back, and that there are forces in life that always give back. And we're going to tune into those beautiful, peaceful things for them to focus on. And then I have, of course, deepeners. All hypnotherapists have deepeners. I'm going to count from, 1 down to 5. And, and I'll do this thing like deeper and deeper, fading away to nothing. And that one really works. They just like, okay, yes, I'll go with. So that, and if some people take longer than others, then I just use more deepeners, and that's no problem. I'll just take as long as we need to. And I make my sessions really long, so I never have to be really confined to time. I'll make them 2 hours. I always can finish within 2 hours. So that really works. And then once they're in that state, I just can do so many different techniques that will get to the source of their pain.